All right, Deuteronomy chapter 2. So we're into this new book, the fifth book of the book of Moses. Something that's interesting to point out about this book is that out of all the books of Moses, Deuteronomy is the one that gets quoted most by other ancient prophets. So as we go forward through the Old Testament, even get into the New Testament, we'll see that there's a lot of discussion when they're quoting the law of Moses. It usually comes from Deuteronomy, basically. So it's a very important book. Now, in this chapter, we actually get to move the story forward of the children of Israel. So the children of Israel press forward to their promised land. Yes, they're finally getting there. Oh, they're finally getting there. It's taken all this time. They're now on their way there. They pass through the lands of Esau and Ammon in peace, but destroy the Amorites. Okay, so verse 1, then we turned and took our journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir many days. The Mount Seir, you can look that up in the Bible dictionary. Now, this is still Moses giving us kind of a backlog of what was going on, basically a little bit of history to kind of pull it all together as they're preparing to get into the promised land. Verse 2, the Lord spake unto me, saying, which when the Lord speaks unto you, that's called revelation. Continuing revelation is important in the Old Testament. Ye have compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau. That was Edom, that area, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. But you shall buy meat of them for money that ye may eat. Ye may also buy water of them for money that ye may drink. For the Lord thy God hath blessed thee in all the works of thy hand. He knoweth thy walking through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord thy God hath been with thee. Thou hast lacked nothing. So they're going to pass through this land, basically, and they're not to mess with Edom. They're not to take them over, not to conquer them, not to do anything, basically. So here's a quote that Hugh Nibley has. In fact, he said, God has given good things to other nations also, some of them weaker than Israel, and all of them hostile. Those gifts of God to others are to be strictly respected. Speaking of eating mites, ammonites, and Moabites, the Lord gave stern commandments. Weaker nations are greatly concerned about the Israelite threat. Meddle not with them. Not an inch of their land belongs to you, because I gave it to them. I gave it all to the children of Esau. He tells them that when he has a score to settle with other nations, he will let Israel know if it concerns them. Meanwhile, let no one interfere with the gifts God chooses to bestow on others. This is his book, Approaching Zion, chapter 7. It's actually How to Get Rich. It's a pretty good chapter. That's a good book. But realize that sometimes God gives gifts to other nations, to other people, and that's not a bad thing, okay? And it's important for us to understand those gifts that they're given and realize it's not our job to meddle with those, but even in our day and age, to even enhance those. So what are some blessings that other nations have been given by God? Well, the beauty is we can look those up nowadays, which is really nice. If you go into the Gospel Library in the church history section, there is a section that is alphabetized of all of it's basically a history of all the countries in the world where the church is and the history of how the church got there. What are the early pioneers of each nation? So if you want to look up even some of the nations maybe your descendants are from to see how the gospel got up there, that you might even come across some of your family names in those histories as well. So a lot of fun things we can learn in there to see how God has blessed other people also, which is really important. But here's the thing is God gave Esau this land. It's not for the children of Israel to mess with, basically. Okay, verse 8. When we passed by from our brethren, the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, through the way of the plain from Elath, and from Ezion Geber, we turned and passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. And the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for a possession. because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. So that's an important thing to look at is, in fact, Ar is in the Bible dictionary too. So this is the children of Lot. And if you remember, Lot had a wife and a couple of daughters and left. Wife's Lot died on the way out from Sodom and Gomorrah. And wife Lot's daughters got him drunk and then got pregnant by him because they were worried that he would have no seed, no more continuation. Well, he did, thanks to what they did, which wasn't necessarily the best, but they were there. So this land was given to their descendants, basically. Verse 10, the Emims dwelt therein in times past, and a people great, and many and tall as the Anakims. Now these are, in verse 10, if you notice, there's a footnote for the Anakims. This is an ancient race of large people, sometimes translated as giants. There are several ancient stories of giants, the giants. In fact, there's one that goes back to the time of Enoch, the pre-flood time of a race of people when the sons of men mingled with the sons of God mingled with the daughters of men, that a race of giants was born out of that, basically. But there's still some groups that were giants. If you remember, as we get into the war of the Israelites and the Philistines, we learn of Goliath, who was a 9-foot giant. So there's some DNA in the area among some of these people that produce some pretty exceptionally tall children. And you can look up the names of these different groups in the Bible dictionary to learn more about them, in fact, which I do encourage you to do. If you haven't got the hint by now, Bible dictionary is chock full of great information to help you in your gospel study. So make sure you're using that Bible dictionary. In fact, the reason I know that all these things are in the Bible dictionary is not only did I read the Bible dictionary, but I went through and all of the notations, whenever scriptures were mentioned in the Bible dictionary, at least in the Old Testament, I marked those down so that I could, when I'm reading the scriptures, I go, oh, there's more in the Bible dictionary about this. So a lot of good stuff there. Verse 12, the Horims also dwelt in Seir before time, but the children of Esau succeeded them, when they had destroyed them from before them and dwelt in their stead, as Israel did unto the land of his possession, which the Lord gave unto them. So there's a little bit of a history that we get in these couple of verses here of people that are even more ancient than Esau and Israel, that they used to dwell in that land and were there. So if you want to dive into more of the historical side of things right there, this is a great spot to do some digging into these groups. Look them up in the Bible dictionary and look them up. Even on do a Google search for these people to learn a bit more about these ancient groups. There's probably a couple of these that we might not know much about from an archaeological standpoint, just because we haven't found a lot of their information after, because these are groups that have been destroyed. They were destroyed thousands of years ago. So the likelihood that we come across stuff that would corroborate them these days isn't great. We're still trying to find stuff about some of the people we know a lot about from the Bible. So, but it's possible that we could know a little bit about those groups. All right, now verse 13. Now rise up, said I, and get you over the brook Zered. And we went over the brook Zered. And the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of men of war were wasted out from among the hosts, as the Lord sware unto them. Remember, okay, this is again going back, okay, and this is important to look at because when the children of Israel left Egypt, okay, it took them a few months, if I remember right, to get over to Mount Sinai. And it seems like they were in Sinai, in that area, for about a year. That's when Moses got most of the revelations of how to set up the tabernacle and what were the laws of what we call the law of Moses today. He gathered that in that time frame, basically. And then they journeyed from there up to this place, Kadesh Barnea, basically. And this is the place where they came into, that was just outside the promised land area, basically. Excuse me. So they were getting to that point. So, and that took a couple of months, basically, to go from Sinai all the way up to where they were just outside the promised land. And remember, they sent 12 spies in because the people are like, I don't know. We heard that there's lots of people up there. You've mentioned there's people that already live there. let's send spies to go check it out. So they sent spies to go check it out. 10 of the 12 spies says it's a beautiful land, but it is inhabited by giants and other people. There's no way we would win against them. And Joshua and Caleb were the only two that said, no, 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 we, with God's help, we can totally do this. This is a beautiful land. You're going to love this. But because the children of Israel rebelled, and they said, okay, we're not going to go and do this. So they rebelled, and so that's when they began. They went back, and they went around basically up and down in that area for 38 years. And now they're moving back up and around, kind of taking a long way around the area to get to the promised land. So this is, again, just kind of telling us a little bit of this backstory. Very short telling of him. Let's see. Yeah, verse 15 is where we left off. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from among the hosts until they were consumed. This is the people. Remember, all the people had to die off so the younger generation could inherit the land who didn't rebel against God. So it came to pass when all the men of war were consumed and dead from among the people, that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Thou art to pass over through Ar, the coast of Moab, this day. This is verse 19. When thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given unto the children of Lot for a possession. That also was accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelt therein in old time, when the Ammonites call them Zamzumims. And you can look this up, actually. That footnote goes to Genesis 14:5. Basically go back to the time of Genesis. So Ammon, this is a really interesting point too. Ammon is actually an Egyptian name for Amun, the god of the sun. So the Ammonites are probably Egyptians, an Egyptian cult or Egyptian group that has come out from that area, which is also interesting because it's the name of an Egyptian god, Amun, and we also find that word Ammon as a great missionary in the Book of Mormon. So he has it's an Egyptian name. Verse 21: A people great and many and tall as the Anakims, but the Lord destroyed them before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. So again, a little bit of history, pre-Israelite history there. Verse 22, he did to the children of Esau, which dwelled in Seir, when he destroyed the Horims from before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead, even unto this day. And the Avims, which dwelt in Hazarim, 23a is villages. They dwelt in villages, even unto Azah, the Caphtorims, which came forth out of Caphtor, which is Crete, from which early Philistines migrated to Canaan. So the Philistines, as it says in here, it came from Crete. We know that's up by more Greece area, so kind of the northern end of the Mediterranean there when you think about that area, basically. So the Philistines came from up there down, and then maybe their giants aren't known. People in the Greek area, of course, there's a lot of mingling with Roman Empire and everything else up that way. But maybe that's where some of the giant DNA came from, or maybe they came down and mingled with the giants, and that's where they ended up getting more giant DNA mingled with them and got a bigger people out of them. But that's where they came from. So the Caphtorims, which came from Caphtor, if you look at this 23b, the footnote is Crete. Caphtor is Crete, which is up in the Greece area. So further north, which is where the early Philistines, Caphtorim was the name of the Philistines, pre-Philistine groups, basically, when they came down to Canaan. Verse 24, Rise up, take your journey, and pass over the river Arnon. Behold, I have given into thine hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon and his land. Begin to possess it and contend with him in battle. So remember, they came up and they went around the Dead Sea on the east side of the Dead Sea, and this is where they're getting into the Amorites, and the Amorites came out and attacked them. Remember, if you remember in the book of Numbers, they said, hey, we want to pass by your land and be fine. And the king said, no, you're not. I'm going to come out and fight you. So they destroyed the Amorites. They were given, as it says in verse 24, God gave the Amorites into their hand. Probably because the Amorites attacked the Israelites. And so they're like, well, He made his choice, and now he's going to lose his land. Excuse me. All right, verse 25. This day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven. Who shall hear report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee? And I sent messengers out of the wilderness of Kedemoth unto Sihon king of Heshbon with words of peace, saying, Let me pass through thy land. I will go along by the highway. I will neither turn unto the right nor to the left. Thou shalt sell me meat for money that I may eat. Give me water for money that I may drink. Only I pass through on my feet, as the children of Esau which dwelt in Seir, and the Moabites which dwelt in Ar did unto me, until I shall pass over Jordan into the land which the Lord our God giveth us. But Sihon king of Heshbon would not let us pass by him, for the Lord thy God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into thy hand, as appeareth this day. Now remember, we talked about this also when we covered the story in the book of Numbers. This is kind of a similar wording like they got in when we look at the Egyptian plagues, that it said that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. And that's a mistranslation. The Lord wasn't playing games with Pharaoh, basically by going, I'm commanding Moses to get my people out, but I'm basically going to command you to not let them out. So it creates this conflict. That makes sense if you think of Greek gods. That makes sense that they would play they'd play humans against each other and have games with them. But when you think of, which is maybe where some of that logic comes from, is some of the Greek translations of the ancient scriptures that have been used to help us learn the scriptures as we have them today. But the thing is, that's most likely not what really happened, because that doesn't sound appropriate for God to do. He's not going to play games with us. He gives us our agency, so he's not going to play these games and meddle with that. So most likely what has happened is not that the Lord hardened his heart, but he had a hard heart. He was not willing to work with the children of Israel, basically. So that's most likely what has happened here. So verse 31, And the Lord said unto me, Behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his hand before thee. Begin to possess, that thou mayest inherit his land. Then Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, to fight at Jahaz. Now remember, Esau and the Moabites didn't fight. They didn't want to fight. And it's probably because they were, as the Hugh Nibley quote pointed out, they were lesser nations. They were nations that they knew Israel would wipe them out. They weren't as numerous as Israel. They were afraid of Israel. So they let Israel pass by. So there's a good chance the Amorites are a pretty big nation. They're a pretty strong army, and they're not afraid of Israel. They're willing to come out and try to destroy Israel, and that's going to go really bad for them. But because the Amorites probably have a reputation in the area of being a very strong army, when Israel wipes them out, that's going to send a message to the rest of the people in the area. Oh my gosh, they wiped out the Amorites. If they can take out the Amorites, be careful with these people, because they're a force to be reckoned with. As was mentioned a few verses earlier, that the word is going to spread, and it's going to, in a way, help people deal more friendly with Israel. Some groups, some didn't follow that heed. Okay, let's see. Verse 33, The Lord our God delivered him before us, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. We took all his cities at that time and utterly destroyed the men and the women and the little ones of every city. We left none to remain. So there may have been some that technically came around, but as far as the nation was gone. And so this line of descendancy, the bloodlines, the DNA lines of these people probably have disappeared from the world. They're gone. We can only find them in ancient bones, but we can't necessarily see that there's anybody alive today that would have those traits or lineage with them. Let's see, verse 35, only the cattle we took for a prey unto ourselves, and the spoil of the cities which we took. From Aroer, which is by the brink of the river of Arnon, and from the city that is by the river, even unto Gilead, there was not one city too strong for us, for the Lord our God delivered all unto us. Only unto the land of the children of Ammon thou camest not, nor unto any place of the river Jabbok, nor unto the cities in the mountains, nor unto whatsoever the Lord our God forbade us. So just talking about how they were able to easily take over the Amorites, get them taken care of. They didn't have to worry too much about that. but they avoided the places that God told them to avoid as well. So they were keeping the commandments at this point, following his advice on this. And if reading this, going through some of these ancient names and ancient places, if you kind of sit back and go, this almost feels like I'm reading a little bit of J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. He's the one that did The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Those books had a strong influence from Old Testament and ancient history. So really, really some fascinating things from there. If you see feel like there's a little bit of similarities in some of these names or some of the concepts, there was some influence in his writings from Old Testament and ancient times. More so ancient rather than like Old Testament, but I think he had a pretty good understanding of the Old Testament as well. So great. So now they're recounting this as they're getting ready to go into the promised land. Okay. So we're just about there. Let's see if we can get there in the next chapter.